Adam Boyce with Spartan Mode is with us tonight for a part 2 interview. He's going to be giving us some much needed, potentially life-saving knowledge. We're going to be studying pre-assault indicators and many other things. He's also going to be doing something called pork cutting that we'll be getting into later, and you'll understand why it's important as well. And I'm sure I'll have plenty of other questions for him. I do believe we'll be talking about the best knives for concealed carry as well. All right, so let's get right into it with Adam. Adam Boyce is the owner of Spartan Mode. He's an authorized instructor of Marshal Blade Concepts based in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and one of only a handful of MBC instructors in the entire world who travel to teach seminars. He's a defensive tactics instructor, a pistol, rifle, and shotgun instructor, and a knife designer. And he's also has multiple years training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts. So like if you were to check everything off the box that a well-rounded defender would need, you might look up Adam Boyce, and also a perpetual learner. So Adam, welcome to the show tonight. We're so glad you're here.
Hey, it's good to see you. It's good to be back.
I know. Well, I think our audience was pretty impressed with you last time, so we had some requests to have you back. So I'm really glad that you said yes, because the information that you provide people is so needed. Like I said, well-rounded defender, you're the perfect example of that. You've got a lot of knowledge to bring. So we're going to start out with pre-assault indicators. Then we're going to go to pork cutting, which you'll have to describe and tell people what that is. And then I'll probably have some other questions afterwards to ask you. So does that sound good?
That sounds great. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Is there any other background information people need to know about you before we get into that?
No, I think that's good enough. There's more, but that's great.
Those are the highlights?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. So do you want me to just pop this on the screen and get going on these pre-assault indicators? So tell people what are pre-assault indicators first before we play.
So basically what we want to look at tonight is it doesn't really matter how much you know or how skilled you are if you don't know that the attack's coming. We could train you to be a ninja, but if you don't have that pre-recognition, it's going to make it a lot harder to make it. So we want to talk about that tonight.
Buying yourself time, right?
Yep.
Part of it. Okay. All right. I'm going to start playing. There's no sound, but Adam's going to narrate pretty much.
So just as a caution, again, this is a parental advisory. There is some explicit content on here. We try to take out any videos that were super gory or bloody. We want to start with this one. So if you look here, these guys are on the bus. You have the guy stand up in the middle, the gentleman sitting down with the white hat. There's a lot of things we can learn from this video. First thing you'll notice is the gentleman standing up kind of does a posturing move, leans into the guy. This is kind of that peacocking, like, look, watch out, I'm going to throw a punch, kind of letting the other guy know he means business. You'll notice the guy sitting down, go ahead and takes things out of his hands, sets it down. What he's doing right now is buying time so that he can use his weapon. From this part right here, you see him grooming, touching his face. That's a common gesture we'll see, is touching the face or touching the head. That's pretty common when you see people attack or planning. The next thing you see him do right here, he's going to take that hat off. He's getting rid of any loose articles, just moving out of the way, and then he's going to use that hat to conceal his knife.
Wow.
Right here, you'll see him look to the right. That's a witness looking. He's looking to see if there's any more witnesses and also looking for evasion. Right here, he'll latch on with the support hand or the out hand, and then it's a gross motor skill. So he's just going to go low line thrusts. And that's the most common attack you'll see, is somebody latching on with the support hand and then just thrust repetitively. So we'll watch a few more videos tonight, and as we do, we'll kind of talk about some of these. This one's actually one of my favorite ones when you talk about pre-assault indicators. The gentleman pouring the whiskey there, that's Conor McGregor. You might have heard of him, a UFC fighter. What happened here is he's in a pub and he had his new Proper 12 whiskey and he wanted others to partake. The gentleman said he didn't want it. Right here, you'll see him groom. He's taking that left hand, he's touching his face. He's doing that grooming motion that we saw in the previous video. He's puffing his chest out a little bit, trying to look bigger, and then boom, sucker punches the guy right there.
Wow.
So play this again so you can watch that, but there's his groom. The gentleman's not really paying attention and fires his shot. So here's another good one that will kind of illustrate. It's pretty grainy, but it'll illustrate a lot of things with this. What you'll notice here is two guys get an altercation. You'll see the gentleman here look to the left. He's looking to see if there's any witnesses. He's also looking for his escape plan. He's doing that grooming motion again, touching his face. Now you'll see him kind of do like a little bit of shift with his body weight, glances again. And after he shifts his body weight, loads up and fires his shot. The fascinating thing is if you start watching videos and seeing how things happen, there's a lot of common occurrences. You won't see the same things every time, but you'll start seeing clues. So here we'll notice on this one, kind of the same thing. You've got a little bit of posturing going on. Their space is just too close. He's looking for a diversion here. So what he's doing at this point, he's looking to the side, getting his hands out. He's trying to move him around so it looks like it's no big deal when he actually fires his shot. Looks away like we talked about. After he looks away, goes to fire. The gentleman realized what was coming and threw a counterattack. One of the things we do at all the seminars that I teach is we talk about again, you have to be aware of what's going around you, what's going around you. Here's a great example. This lady's on her cell phone. Guy sneaks up behind her, punches in the back, knocks her out. That situational space, not letting people get close enough that they can actually put your hands on you, is something that is critical, often hard to do, but it's a critical component. Here's another example of a couple gentlemen. You'll notice here the guy's getting posture, hides the knife, kind of blades his body, and then he's going to stick it back behind his body. This is something you see a lot with knife attacks, is they'll hide the blade. Even though he'd seen it, he still hides it. And he throws one stab. One thing I want you to notice from this one also is that the gentleman that got stabbed didn't immediately burst into flames like you see in the movies. The guy just didn't stop fighting. He's able to get up and run. Mm-hmm. Just like handguns, the unpredictability of a knife attack, you can't say, hey, if you get stabbed here, this is going to stop you immediately. You'll notice here, hands, older gentleman walks up, stabs the guy in the chest. Again, the hands are what deliver the weapon system. If people get within that space and their hands that are accessible to a weapon, they can stab you. This was outside of a club. What happened here is he was denied access, and he gets a little bit upset about it. You'll notice the big gestures with his hands. He's going to wait till this security guard or the guard is occupied. Once he is, you'll notice right here where we stop it, he's going to reach down into his pocket. He's actually grabbing his knife at this point. He's waiting while everybody's not looking, paying attention. He's got the knife in his hand. You'll notice what he's going to do is he's going to reach out with the left hand, and then he's going to stab the guy with his strong hand. If I can touch you, I can feel you. If I can feel you, I can stab you. So that's something we'll see a lot, is people reach out to hold on to somebody and then they'll stab. This one was in Russia. What I want you to pay attention on this one is down at the bottom of the screen, the gentleman in the black leather jacket, and then the gentleman in the white sweater. Again, here you can see him kind of posturing. It looks like it's kind of an ego thing going on here, but the guy's going to hide the knife behind his back. So he's kind of blading his shoulders a little bit, hiding what he has in his hands. See, it's a pretty big knife. And then again, he's going to reach out that support hand, low line thrust. Again, the guy's trying to block it just by sticking his hand, doesn't quite stop. You'll notice often when people go to stab too, if it's denied because of their hand, they'll go high. Looks like the gentleman had some nice sambo or some judo or something and took him down the ground. Thinks at this point he's winning the fight, but in reality, he'd been stabbed multiple times. If you watch the full video on this, it takes about a minute for the gentleman to pass out from loss of blood. So that's also something to consider, is a lot of people look at knife use and think, oh, I'll just stab somebody and then the fight's over. But it's a long time if you have to defend yourself against somebody with a knife. Here's another great example of being able to fight with a knife or against a knife. This gentleman's hiding the knife again, blading the shoulders, hiding the knife behind his back. You notice he's kind of looking off to the side a little bit. From there, he's going to reach out and one through low line thrust. You'll notice here in a second, again, we try to take out any of the really gory videos, but you'll notice here in a second that his shirt has a blood stain, so he was absolutely stabbed in the stomach. The guy continues to fight. Again, the gentleman stabbed is still up and standing, backing away, and is able to fight. But I think the best part of this video here is this guy has a really good girlfriend. And I think if I could give you any advice at all, is make sure you have a good girlfriend or wife.
I was wondering why those guys weren't helping him.
Yeah. Okay, now this next video we're going to look at, this is actually a couple homeless guys in New York. And it's not so much about knife fighting styles. The big thing I want everybody to understand from this video is if there's somebody like is attacking you with a knife and you have space, run, don't fight. By all means, get out of there. What you'll see there is he actually had the extensor side of his hand cut. So the extensor side is the side of your hand that allows your fingers to extend. You'll notice that he looked down. He can still hold on the knife, but his structure just isn't really great at that point. So you're going to see him go from a strong hand right hand grip to a left-handed grip. Gentleman comes out again with a knife. Guy glances down at his hand. Again, this is mutual combat here, and this is what we do as defenders. We run away if we can. Mm-hmm. There he is. He's going to get cut here. This time it's going to be on the flexor side. So the flexor side, again, is the side of your hand that allows your hand to grip. You notice that it goes completely limp, and that gentleman is done at that point, being able to hold on to a knife and continue a fight.
And he's still hanging around. He's not leaving.
Yep. Okay, this is the last video. This is one that we do a lot at the seminars I teach, and it's not so much about knife versus gun or gun versus knife. The idea is to understand the reactionary time. So whoever has the first strike has more time. So what we did in that one is we actually had a training knife. It's just an AccuStrike. And the way that these work is when you make contact with them, they'll actually light up and beep. So you know when you make contact.
It's like the most annoying sound in the world.
It is. They're a lot of fun though. And then from the standpoint of assert, we give the other guys assert pistol. And the idea is, again, just to show you that if you're not paying attention to what's going on and they get that first jump on you, you're behind the curve. So that's kind of the reason we show that.
So I had a couple questions real quick about those videos. The first thing is you showed multiple videos where there was grooming, looking for witnesses, and posturing, those types of things. You identify those because you understand what those are. But the people that are doing them in the moment, they don't have any conscious thought that that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah, for the majority of people, they don't understand that they're doing that. That's kind of a subconscious thing that people will do.
Yeah.
People that have trained a lot will still try not to do those things. But that's also a reason why we don't say, hey, they did this, now he's going to stab. You have to kind of look at the whole picture and take kind of each piece into context and say, hey, is this actual attack, or is this person just maybe have an itch on their face, or maybe they saw a buddy. So it's kind of the whole thing, you know. When I talk about knife,
Adam just did it. I just saw it.
Did he just did this?
Yep, he just did it.
So Adam, if I can jump in here,
yeah,
right?
absolutely, yep.
In the cop world, right, we always said that the loser of a knife fight died at the scene. The winner of a knife fight died on the way to the hospital in the back of the ambulance, right? If you get in a knife fight, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get cut. So as I watched your videos, I was taking a couple notes, and it looks like the big gestures, right? I know as a cop, whenever people didn't make big gestures, I kind of knew that they were going to try to roundhouse or do something. So could we say that's one of the things you're talking about? If we see gestures off to the side, tends to pull the attention, that's probably an indicator. Another one is face touching. And the way I think of it psychologically, and correct me if I'm wrong, is usually people are still deciding and they're thinking. And I know when I think or decide, I tend to kind of touch something up in here as I'm thinking about it. So they're kind of making a decision and looking for their way to go. The other is always looking around, right? You're looking for witnesses, escape routes, or somebody else who might jump in there who might hurt you because you're hurting somebody they know or like. So could we say those are probably it? And another big one is if the hands go away. You can't see it where I'm sitting, but if the hands disappear, because knife attacks always come from very close and very quick. So if the hands disappear, should we say those four things are really the big warning signals?
I'd say those are probably some of the bigger four. Yes. Yep. There's a bunch of other stuff, but I'd say those four would be the ones that are pretty telltale that they're up to something.
There were a lot of those videos where the guy had his hand behind his back.
Yep.
Or both hands behind his back. So
yeah.
Or Laura, it seems like they'll blade it down by their leg or just behind like the
just
hip
behind
somewhere.
their leg. Yeah, but still, you
like
can't see their hand, though. That's the thing.
So if their hand disappears, that's a clue something is coming. It might be pointy and sharp.
Yep.
Okay, I'll jump off.
Oh, awesome.
The other thing I was wondering was, remember there was a guy in the black leather jacket and the guy in the white hoodie. And they stabbed the guy in the white hoodie multiple times. Like, I think he eventually ended up dying of blood loss. But it was almost like he didn't realize. I mean, obviously he realized he had been stabbed, but it was almost like he didn't realize he was losing blood. Is that a thing? Like
that's absolutely a thing. So most people I've talked to that have been into altercation, have been stabbed, didn't realize it at first. They thought they were just getting punched. And one thing to kind of think about that is most people don't punch you in the kidney or in the ribs. They don't punch you down here low. It's usually if they're punching us to the face a lot of times. So that might be a clue too, is like, why am I getting stabbed down here repeatedly? But yeah, a lot of the people that I know that have been stabbed did not realize it was a knife until they couldn't step with the leg, or they felt something warm and wet, or they lost use of their hand. A good friend of mine who actually I got to train after he'd been in an altercation. He was in an altercation where the gentleman went to stab him. He did a wrist tie. So he basically grabbed on the guy's wrist. When the guy pulled back, it cut off these bottom three fingers of his hand. Again, he didn't realize that his fingers had even been cut off at that point until he tried to grab on. It was like, something is weird here. So a lot of times people don't realize that they've been stabbed or cut until after. So
instead of, if you can't run away, is it better to be in close so you can control things rather than being in that middle ground where you're at the end of the knife? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be
a complicated question, probably.
It is. It's going to depend on the individual. However, the safest place with the knife is either really close where you have control of the limb, or far away where they can't make contact with the blade.
Right.
So that kind of middle ground where...
Hey, it's the same with a horse, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Just letting you know, if you're worried about a horse kicking you, either getting really close to them or far enough away they can't. But that middle part, nobody cares. But that's how I look at it.
No, it's the same idea. If they have that room where they can... Yeah, same idea. So either really close where you can control limbs, where you can minimize the mobility to one joint, or be far enough that they can't make contact is the two safer places. But again, the safest place is to be way far away if you can avoid it at all.
Yeah, just get out of there.
I want to jump back in on here because you said something really important. When people are swinging at their face, let's say somebody punches at you and they miss. If they're swinging at the face and you may not see what their hands are doing, you just know it's going towards your face, you're probably just going to take a hit of some type. But if it's swinging towards the body and they're missing, that should be a clue to you that there's probably a knife, a puncture device to go to this, right? When they're going for the face, they're trying to scramble the computer system. When they're going for this, they're trying to kill you, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to shut down your organs, cut your blood loss, everything. So this is usually pokey stuff. This is usually blunt stuff.
There you go. Yep. Spot on, Adam.
Cool. Okay, well, I don't have any more questions about that. And by the way, guys, if you have questions, please put those in the comments and we'll get to those at the end of the live. We'll do a live Q&A at the end. Do you want to move to the pork cutting stuff, Adam?
Yeah, we could do that. And if nobody has questions, let's do that. So I think one of the important things to understand if you're going to use a knife, this is something I learned from Michael Janich of Marshal Blade Concepts, is that you need to be able to quantify what that knife will do. So one of the ways that we do that in Marshal Blade Concepts is we use what we call pork man. So got my little
pork man. Sorry, I said it wrong, didn't
I?
I?
No, you're great. So what it is, it's a wooden dowel, and then you take a pork tenderloin, butterfly it in half, and then you'll take butcher's twine, so you can see that kind of underneath. You wrap that around, and then about 30 layers of saran wrap. So what that's going to do, according to trauma surgeons, it takes about 5 pounds of pressure to puncture human ligaments, tendons, skin, that type of stuff. So about 5 pounds of pressure with a sharp knife is what we're looking at. So this is pretty close representation of what that is like. So we like to use that for different testing. So what I'm going to do to make this just nice and easy is I'm going to start with the biggest, scariest knife that I have. So if you see this one here, this is just a little Swiss Army knife here. So pretty small. If you look at the blade length on this one, you're looking at about 1.5 inches here is what that is. So to demo this, I'm not going to do any crazy windups, any hee-haws, anything like that. I'm just going to take a nice little swipe right here. I'm going to just cut and show you what this does. Can you guys see me okay from here? Should I angle the camera a little bit? We'll angle it up a little bit. Okay, so again, nothing crazy. I'm just going to go right here. Okay, so what you can see here is if you look at this, as far as the cut on this, we are down about 1/2 inch without any crazy wind up. And if you look at the length of that cut, you're looking about a 2.5 inch cut without anything crazy windups on that. Yeah. So again, if you picture this being like a ligament or excuse me, like an arm or a limb, that's potentially what somebody can do if they're swinging at you with this teeny little blade. So you've seen that. Let's show you something even smaller. So if you look at just this little box cutter here, these are just one of those little pop box cutters. Is maybe a 1/4 inch long blade is all. We'll do kind of the same thing here. So I'm going to take it and nothing crazy. I'm just going to go right here. And again, if you look at that, as far as the depth of it, I didn't have to try very hard. And you can see that cut in nice and deep all the way down into that wood dowel. And the length of that cut, again, is a couple inches long. So now you might say to yourself, well, hey, I wear clothes. So I live in Idaho. It gets cold here. We wear Levi's a lot. So let's show you now what a little blade like that can do with a layer of denim on it. So I'll take this little denim here and I'm going to go to the thickest part here where the Levi is overlapped. And I'm going to do just that same thing. I'll do it with that same little box cutter just to kind of show you what a little tiny blade can do. Again, I'm going to cut this on the seam. So there's a lot of dense denim there to cut through. Oops, got the cut out. So on that one, my cut actually hit into that, didn't slice it as well.
Can you hold it up a little bit more?
Yep, let me actually do one more cut with it. So kind of, let's see here. Let me get the camera up and I can actually maybe show it easier and maybe from this angle. All right, can you kind of see that? So I'm going to go right here. So again, the denim is nothing. Yeah. And if you look at the cut on this, kind of the same thing. We're just down here to the depth of this pork.
Someone's asking, does the plastic wrap simulate the skin then?
Yeah, so this plastic wrap simulates the skin. Excuse me, plastic wrap simulates the skin. And in reality, this is actually slightly harder to cut than actual human anatomy from the standpoint of you don't have the blood pressure on the inside pushing back on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so great thing, Clint. You're spot on with it. As a box cutter, kind of like this is what happened with 9/11 is how they overtook the plane. That you're spot on with that. So people look at it and they'll say, hey, that guy only had a knife. Why did the police officer shoot him? Well, you can imagine the kind of damage that can be performed with something so small.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that actually. Maybe the box cutter, I would have thought that, but that almost is like a little kid's knife.
Yeah, it's just
didn't seem like it would
Swiss
do much.
Army.
Yeah.
So now let's just for fun, let's look at some normal size knives. We won't go too much in depth on this because I don't want to necessarily talk about knives all night long.
Well, that's okay if you do.
So if you look at this one, this is probably a fairly common type of knife that's used in attack, just a cheap kitchen knife. So let's look at that. And there's some things we can learn from using this. As far as slicing with this, if I go right here, again, I'll just go on the denim and I'm going to slice down through it. Cut through the denim, no problem. And then as far as the cut, it's straight down in there. What you'll notice is you'd assume that the cut would be bigger and longer, but because of the arc of my hand, once I hit the end of that, it kind of dissipated the energy.
Oh, okay.
So where a knife like this really shines is more in a stabbing motion. And see how easy it is just to penetrate through stuff from that standpoint. Let's talk about blade geometry real quick. We won't go too much depth on it. If you look at something like this that has this kind of curve back into it, what will happen with this is as we make the cut, again, right there, just going to cut, nothing crazy, just right here. But what you'll see with that nice deep cut, and then when I went here, I actually caught into what would be like the bone. So the hook of the end of it stuck in, and this cut is all from just leverage down. So from the standpoint of using something like this, there's a potential that it's getting caught or stuck onto things because of that big hook. And then if you look at something maybe more like this one, you'll notice that it has a lot more belly or curve into it. So when we look at how something like this cuts, what you'll find with it, so go kind of right here, you can see it right there. So all right, so I'll cut right here. Again, no problem there with that. And then as far as the cut, I'm right here. So it's kind of a more shallow cut. And the reason for that is once I made a pressure here, just like a skinning knife, you've got a big belly or curve on it. So once I hit the end of that, it dissipates the energy and then it slides off. So the depth of that wasn't as deep or as long because of that big belly or that curve into it.
So then what do you want? Something in between then?
Yeah, so depending on the type of knife use you're going to use, if you're going to do more of cutting, then maybe look at something more like a box cutter. So the shape of it, if you look at this, is one of the first knives that I designed here. And you'll look at it and it looks like it's kind of like a big box cutter. This is called a Warncliffe. And the idea behind it is as you apply pressure from here, the pressure gets stronger and stronger and stronger all the way to the tip. So what you'll find with this, if you cut with something like this, right there, if you cut with something like this, you'll notice that as I'm cutting, that energy is amplified all the way down to the end of it. So the cut goes all the way there. I actually hit the bone, stopped into it, and I hit that big cut right from there.
But it doesn't hook onto it like that other one did.
Right. So let me see if I can do it from kind of here. So again, you can see the depth of a cut like that.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
So Adam, if I can jump in. So that curved knife blade, right? So that's not so good for stabbing if you have to, where the one you designed that you just showed can do both. It can go deep, but it also can be more of a stab tool if need be, correct?
Right. Yeah. So the idea behind the blade geometry on this, again, is that cut goes deep, but also if you're going to thrust, what happens with this is Mike Jensch did some testing years ago with this style of blade. He did a bunch of tests on all different types of styles. And what they would do is they'd put up on an arm, and there's a big piece of styrofoam, and they drop it from the same height, and it would swing and hit into the styrofoam. And so they're trying to quantify and decide, hey, what type of blade works best for penetration? And what he found is when he was doing something with a Warncliffe like this.
What's that called again? Warncliffe?
Warncliffe. I'll hold it up there so you can kind of see the angles of it. But what they would find with something like that, what would happen is it wasn't sticking. All the other knives go and they stick in a couple inches. He's like, that's kind of weird. And when they slowed down the camera and looked at it, what was actually happening is that ramp would actually open up the channel, make it bigger, so it'd go all the way in and bounce all the way out. So the knife is able to penetrate deeper because of the blade geometry on it. So again, for thrusting and for cutting, it's a great blade geometry.
So if you looked at it almost from aerodynamics, from the tip forward, right, it's cutting the air well, which also means it should cut through, say, objects you might penetrate through, right, skin, clothing, whatever else. It should do that and go deeper with it. From what I see of the design of it, it looks like a pretty good design. Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there more pork cutting to be had?
There can be. Is there any questions on the pork? We have more if you want, or we can end it with that.
No, there's no questions yet. Usually people are pretty quiet till the end. So, but if there's something in there, we'll throw it in maybe if we need to. Okay. Just for fun, we just designed this knife. This one's going to be coming out soon. And so probably not something you carry around in your backpack, but this is a knife that I was going to be on a TV show a few years ago, and I worked with Tops Knives, and basically this was to win the show, and they're going to put this in production this year. So if you're interested in a big knife, let's show you what this one does. Wow.
Stand back because limbs are flying on this one, but I'm just going to go right here. Yeah, so I snapped that thing down into, again, no crazy windups or anything, but I had also tension here, but you can kind of see what that did. Again, I'm holding the stick as I'm doing this, but
yeah,
don't want to be on the bad end of that either.
No kidding.
So if I can throw a question here, right, Adam? So I grew up in West Africa. I used machetes all the time, right, to clear entire fields, jungle, whatever else. That knife does not look like a machete. It looks more like a weapon of war. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so this is actually based off of a Filipino fighting knife. It's called a ganumting. And the idea behind it is if you look at, I keep getting the blade wrong, but if you look at most like long blades, when you thrust with the long blade, the thing is the blade is going to be kind of pointed up. So if you're targeting here, but you're at a hand angle that goes up this direction. What this does is because of the curve on the backside is wherever you point your hand is where you stab. So you'll thrust in that same area. Also, because of the weight on it, it's really good for like downward thrusts and cuts. These were traditionally used by Filipinos for clearing forests, kind of like a big machete would. But anyway, I'm kind of excited about that one.
You should be. If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and consider, if you're able, to become a paid subscriber on defenders-live.com. Your support is the only way I'm able to continue doing this labor of love. And also, if you're looking for exceptional firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and look at the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. Are those available for purchase, or what did you say about that?
They're not yet. They'll be out probably, I would guess, in about a year. Blade Show is this weekend in Atlanta, Georgia, and they're going to actually show it for the first time there. So
cool. Wow.
Hey, before we move on, can I go back to some of the pre-attack indicators?
Yeah.
If you don't mind for a second. Adam, can we say that the places, like if somebody's coming at you, the places they're going to probably attack is something that usually I tend to, in my experience, glance at. So if they're glancing at the face, that's probably going to be an impact. But if they're glancing at the body and looking away, that means they're probably going for the central box here. Therefore, that might be a stab. Would that be a good pre-attack indicator?
Yeah, so typically what they'll do is it's called target glancing. So if you're carrying a gun or if they want to take it from you, they will glance at what they're intending to do. Another thing they'll do, and I didn't really go into detail, again, just with the shortness of the videos, but they'll do a thing called picking. So not only will they look at what their intention is, but they'll also feel their own weapon to make sure that they have it. So a lot of times they'll give those clues away like, hey, I got to make sure my gun is still there or my knife is still there or my weapon. So they'll reach down and touch toward it. And then subconsciously they'll, without thinking, they'll actually look at where they're going to target to make sure that they can actually do that as they're processing it through the brain.
Fascinating. See, he just disappears. He's like a ghost. Okay, so my question then, before we get into, I mean, you kind of talked about probably the best knife for concealed carry based on what you were talking about. But before we do that, because we're running out of time, we only got 20 minutes left. So guys, if you have questions, put those in the comments now because we're going to get to those soon. I'm curious to know, because this is a subject I don't know much about, and I appreciate that you're patient with me with the questions I have. Like, I'm thinking, okay, I could go out there and I could get whatever knife Adam Boyce recommends and I could carry it. But like, honestly, what kind of training does a person need to go through before they're prepared to carry that and use that effectively?
Yeah, and first, before I answer that, let me add one more thing too. So I did show some knives here and some things I like. I typically don't say, hey, you need to go get this knife. And the reason for that is I think it's more the individual than it is the tool, like having the right mindset to use it. But you do need to understand how it's going to function. So I think from a basic standpoint of being able to use a knife is you need to understand, first of all, if you're going to use a knife, you need to make sure that you get rid of any other options, either avoidance, run, whatever you can do first. If you're going to train, there's a lot to that because everybody's different. It's like, hey, what does it take for me to be good at calculus? I don't know what it's going to take for you to be good at calculus. We're all different. Yeah. You know, so that's kind of a tough question to answer.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from there. Well, I don't feel as though I would be prepared or trained to use it. But then again, if it was all I had, I bet I would make the best use of it I could. Right. So, yeah, you're right. That's a really good question. So that was a loaded question, as they say. So then what are some of the considerations perhaps that we need to take into account when thinking about purchasing a knife for concealed carry?
Well, first of all, is you got to think about like, where are you going to be traveling? Where do you frequent? There are places where you can't carry a gun, where you can carry a knife. There are restrictions to blade length. For example, I work in a federal building sometimes, and in that building, you can't have a blade that's over 2.5 inches long. So just that is a huge factor for me as far as knife selection, is I don't want to carry something that makes me a felon right off the get-go. So again, wherever you're going to travel, wherever you're going to frequent, you got to make sure that you understand those laws. One website I really like is called bladeup.com. And they've got a bunch of the laws as far as the different states of what is legal, what is not, because it is different between state, even between county. So you need to make sure you understand that. But the main things I would look at is, if you're going to select a knife for self-defense, is you need to be able to cut and thrust effectively with it. You need to be able to manage impact shock. So what that means is, whatever the handle is, if I'm going to thrust or to use it, I want to make sure that my fingers don't slide forward and I cut my fingers off. And then I need to be able to hold on to the knife. Those are kind of the main 3 criteria that I look for when I'm selecting a knife. Another factor that I like to consider is there a training knife for that? So like, for example, one of the knives that I like, again, this is Spyderco. You'll notice the blade geometry is a Wharncliffe. That's a Yojimbo. But there's also a purpose-built trainer for this, so you can practice opening and deploying it. Because again, if you can't get the knife out when you need it, it really doesn't buy you anything. It's almost the same idea of, hey, I've got my 1911 in my truck, but the thing is happening right here. So you need to be able to make sure you can actually deploy it too.
Right. And we talked earlier about teaching concepts and ideas rather than techniques and skills, although techniques and skills are important. But I think one of the things I really appreciate about you is that, for one, you're constantly learning all the time. You're out there training all the time and with different people, and you encourage that in your students as well. And I haven't been to one of your classes yet, but I would imagine that you would be teaching a lot of context involving what it is that people need to know in order to be effective with whatever they learn. Did you say that you were considering a new class? And what did that involve? Because I'm really excited to hear about that, because that's something I think I would really enjoy.
So this is kind of something a lot of people don't know about me. But again, for my day job, I work for a government agency and I teach firearms, heavy weapons, play with explosives a little bit. So I get to go through the process of teaching firearms a lot. And almost everybody outside of there knows me as a knife guy. So I'm actually looking at implementing more public courses that will involve firearms, that will involve pepper spray or OC, that will involve more of like awareness courses. We'll set up some scenarios as part of this course. It'll be a 2-day course. It'll involve awareness of your situation, and then also kind of these pre-attack indicators that we've talked about, but also a little bit of gun, a little bit of pepper spray, and a little bit of knife. So that is something that is on the horizon. And
that would be a 2-day class, and you would learn a wide variety of things all in one class, right?
Yep. They just have blocks of each of those pieces.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I will definitely be helping promote that whenever that comes out, whenever you figure out a good name for it.
Awesome. Okay.
So a couple more things before we head into the Q&A. And guys, we need to wrap up here after a while, but you guys got to put in questions so we can have a Q&A. That would be great. One more question here, and it's a little bit more dark, I guess. And that is that, do you really think that people seriously consider the level of violence that they may need to use in order to defend their own life or the lives of others? And I'm sure Adam Winch would have something to say about this as well. But when we look at those videos and we see how up close and personal some of that is, and that wasn't even the worst of it. There was stuff that got taken out, guys, at the last minute. But that's stuff that we need to know, and we need to study, and we need to prepare ourselves for as best we can. But I do feel like sometimes on shows and maybe on TV and all of that stuff, like, that isn't real life. And how stuff goes down on TV is not how it goes down in real life. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people very much underwhelm the intensity of an actual attack, of how challenging it will be if they aren't constantly training and preparing for it. If you look at even just like jiu-jitsu, just sports jiu-jitsu, if you've never done jiu-jitsu before and you go in and train, the first time you go can train with people that actually know what they're doing, you're just going to feel like you know nothing. Now, take a real situation where somebody has a sharp stick or a knife or a gun, or they've got a big rock and they're trying to murder you. It's a whole nother level of violence, a whole nother level that I think a lot of people don't consider. They just think, oh, cool, I go to the range and I practice. But there is that side of it where you're going to have to take it to another level if the situation rises to that point.
Well, and I think that truly a lot of people don't go there mentally or emotionally because they can't imagine anybody, because they don't think that way. They can't imagine another person being that evil. Really. Yeah. I can't imagine experiencing that. Sometimes just watching it it makes your stomach churn. I just can't imagine. Unless you have more thoughts on that, I'll move on. But it's one of those things that I think about often, and I believe is important to study. Whether or not it's hard to look at is beside the point. And we could have shown you a lot worse stuff. There was a lot worse stuff. And I'm sure you, Adam, and the other Adam probably wouldn't have bothered. so much. But when I watched it, it was quite disturbing.
Well, the one thing I will add to that is sometimes we'll see somebody violence. And that's one thing I'll recommend is go watch YouTube. Go watch events that have happened. That's the nice thing about technology now is you don't have to go experience it. You can see it and see what it looks like. So I encourage people to do that. But if you're intimidated by it, don't say, oh, I'll just never learn. I'm never going to be able to defend myself. Learn some basic stuff. Again, we talked about awareness. If you learn some basic fundamental skills, you don't have to be a 30-year martial artist, but you need to learn something, and don't let that intimidation stop you from training. Find for you what your purpose is. I don't know if I remembered on the show last time, if I told you kind of my reason for training. But when I was 12 years old, I lived in a little town called Grant, Idaho. Inside this town, there weren't a lot of people. And I remember one day getting off the school bus, and the lady that ran the gas station just about 100 yards from my house had been murdered. Some young boys, I was 12 at the time, they were 15, basically went into the gas station and shot her in the back of the head and killed her for some gas money. That kind of changed my whole perspective on things. I value life and I value of my friends. And that is a big reason why I continued to train. If you would have met me when I was in high school, you would have never guessed that this is kind of one of the paths I would be going down, is teaching firearms and heavy weapons and teaching self-defense courses.
Yeah.
But that really sparked it in me. And so for you, for whoever is out there listening, if you feel intimidated by it, ask yourself the question, why do I want to train? What's the purpose of me getting better? Even if it's hard, what do I need to do to get better?
Yeah, that's really good. That's important to remember. I didn't throw this at you earlier, so you don't know it's coming, but are there any books that you would recommend for people to read, either about like mindset, overall self-defense, things that maybe have been especially helpful for you?
Yeah. So if we talk mindset first, there's a couple books, and I actually saw it on Adam Winch's desk by Lanny Bashan with Winning in Mind. Yeah. I think we kind of have, if you look at Scott Jolinsky, he talks about the two different people on your shoulder, the one that's encouraging you and the one that's not, saying you're kind of a loser. I think a big part of self-defense is actually having confidence. If you walk with confidence, if you're proud of who you are, that sends a message to those that are looking to harm you as well. So I think having some confidence in yourself. So with Winning in Mind, The Inner Game of Tennis, another great book to read on kind of personal development and positive. There was one, I forgot the name of it. He was a Navy SEAL sniper instructor. I think it was Brandon Webb, if I remember. I read it years ago. I think it was the Red Circle or something like that. But they talked about kind of some of those principles of building confidence. As far as books, there's a lot of books for kind of developing that in your brain as far as on combat, on killing. I'm kind of drawing a blank right now.
David Grossman is that author, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep. Left of Bang. There's a bunch of books out there, but I think I'm more of a visual learner, so I learn a lot from watching YouTube. So the cool thing with YouTube too is they'll actually start sending you videos of, hey, you might be interested in this. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but they'll start recommending.
Well, they want you binge watching, so that's
right. Yep.
It's all part of it.
So if I can jump in again. So Adam, we constantly at Defenders USA, we preach about the legality of using a gun in defense of life. But to me, that comes across all platforms. Would you talk to us quickly about the legalities? And I know it's different state to state, but not very much. But you talk about the legalities of using a knife in defense of life. And I'm going to bet it's pretty much the same thing as with a gun. Yeah.
Yep. So you're spot on with that, Adam. So if you're going to cause grievous bodily harm or death to somebody or using a knife, you're basically going to stop somebody by using a knife. You've raised that level of force up to deadly force, same as it is with a handgun. So you need to be able to articulate when you use a knife the same way you would with a gun. So one way to look at is the 4 general rules. Do they have the ability to cause me harm or death? Do they have the opportunity? Is there imminent jeopardy or happening? Is it happening at this moment? And have I exhausted all their means? So if I have those 4 kind of playing through my head of, hey, this person has taken it up to this level where I'm potentially going to die right now if I don't do something to stop this person from killing me, or in the defense of others. So self-defense in defense of others. If you don't do something in that moment, then that's a justification to be able to use deadly force. One thing that's kind of interesting is the more that I study, the more that I train, the more that I go to classes, the more that I learn, the less I want to ever have to use a knife in self-defense. Same thing with a gun. So I find myself a lot maybe I'll go out in public, and if there's somebody that's rude, like a while back, I went and watched a Rocky movie came out. Can't remember, the Apollo Creed or whatever it is, the newer one. And there was a lady sitting there, and I had my grandfather, and I was saving him a seat, and the lady came up behind and she took the seat that I was saving for my grandfather. And it kind of makes you upset a little bit, like, hey, lady. And then she took it up to a level. And then I just had to think for seconds, like, it's not even worth arguing. So I just took a whole nother seat somewhere else. And that's the unfortunate thing, but it's also the best self-defense is never having to use anything at all. And maybe I had a worse seat, but does it really matter in the long run? Not really.
Yeah.
So words of wisdom here, right? There's nothing more terrifying than actually having to use violence after you've done it once or twice,
Yep.
right? Once you've had to do it, there's nothing cool about it. There's nothing sexy about it. There's nothing fun about it. And it doesn't matter if it's the moment or the litigious or the emotional aftermath afterwards. Folks, if you can learn from this man, go learn from this man, because if you can avoid the fight in the first place, best thing you can do is avoid the fight. If you can't, you need to know how to use your tools right. And boy, when it comes to knives and fighting, learn from Adam.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate that.
Definitely. Well, let's get into the questions. We've got a few here and we're running out of time. I always feel like I'm running out of time during the lesson.
Yeah.
I know. Okay. Clint wants to know where he can purchase any of your knives.
All right. So right now I'm currently sold out, Clint. So I feel really bad about that. The big blade, that big blade will actually be on Topps website when that one comes out. I'm actually working with Topps right now on a shorter blade that hopefully will be coming out in the next 6 to 7 months, I hope. Once I have those, they'll be up on the website, spartanmode.com.
I don't know how to say this name, Jeanson. If you could have one knife, what would you carry?
Let me ask real quick to clarify that. Are there any restrictions on where I'm traveling? Because that's going to be a big part of it. If I could only have one knife and it was just for self-defense, I'm kind of personal to something I designed. This is another knife design I had. It's a little big for most places. But again, if you look at kind of that Warncliffe, that's something that I would kind of choose. I guess I need more details to recommend. But
okay. Adam Winch wants to know, would you be willing to set up a joint class with him at Defenders USA?
Absolutely. That'd be a lot of fun.
That would be fun.
I would probably have to pay.
You're not that far away from me.
No, yeah, we're close. I would probably have to pay just to hang out with Adam Winch because that guy is awesome.
He is awesome. Okay. Haven Defense Co. On deployment, what's your opinion on fixed versus folders for self-defense? Pros and cons.
Awesome, guys. So a fixed blade is always going to be faster because you don't have, in the words of Chris Fry, he talks about a knife being a broken knife. It's a folder. So if the knife is a folder, now I got to open up. So there's some different deployment methods and we can talk about that. But let me add this little piece. If I'm going to carry a fixed blade, my favorite method is called static line. And basically what I'll do is I'm going to take a sheath and a piece of paracord. On that paracord, I'll have about 12 inches length in total. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the belt, not the belt loop, but the actual belt. And I'm going to do a half a cow hitch. So basically, if you look at it, I'm going like this, and I'm making kind of this tie there on my belt. And then the knife is going to stick inside my waistband down there like that. So now the knife is attached to my belt and then I have tension. If I put it kind of here in my crease of my hips right here, I can carry a big knife, but I can still move around and drive and do all the things without it really being burdensome at all. But the cool thing is when it's attached that way is when I go to clear the garment and grab the knife, as I clear it, it hits the end of that static line and then it deploys. So I'm not worried about cutting myself, especially if you're carrying appendix. You have the problem of potentially giving yourself an appendectomy and cutting your stomach, which is the last thing you want to do if you're trying to defend yourself with a knife. Also, it's really nice for putting the knife away because the sheath is away from your body. You just tuck it back in and then tuck that back in your pants. So if I could choose a knife to carry, it would be a fixed blade and it would be static line if I was carrying it concealed.
Cool. I'm learning a lot.
And maybe off of that, let me add a couple deployment methods just super fast. I know we got a couple minutes, but
no, it's okay. We can go over a little bit.
A couple things to look at as far as a folder. There's several different ways to do that. One is called the thumb opening. And basically what I'm going to do is if there's a stud or if there's a spider hole, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the knife in my hand. I like it kind of indexed here in the palm. My thumb will just kind of flip up and that's going to open the knife that way. So just flip it up that way. Another method that you can do is called the spider drop. So if it's in the back of my pocket, I reach back and grab it. I'm pinching at the top of the knife and I flick it down and then I'll index off of my hip or whatnot. Another method is called inertial. Basically from there, what I'm going to do is my hand's going to be up nice and high around the pivot pin. I'll rotate my hand and then the knife deploys that way. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but I would also recommend that you know one or two of those that you really like, that you're comfortable with, but also know the two-hand method. The two-hand method is probably the easiest to learn. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the back of the knife on the handle here, and then my fingers are going to grab the top of the blade. When I do that, this hand is going to drive down the blade, the handle side, and the blade side is going to drive up. So my hands are doing kind of this motion. So what you'll notice here is as I'm grabbing this, one hand goes down, one goes up, and that opens the knife up. The reason I recommend that one is under stress, trying to get the knife open doing this versus just doing that might be a better option. Again, training is important, but knife deployment's also, it's not easy to do, but it can be, and it can be something that you don't really think about that you can just do kind of automatically if you get enough reps into it. Another thing have out there is called the Emerson wave, basically this hook. So you have it inside of your pocket, and as it pulls out, it hooks on and opens the knife. So there's a bunch of little things like that you can do. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, you can basically take a zip tie and it will do that same thing. As you pull it out of your pocket, it will hook on and open up the knife. So again, we could talk about knife deployment and different types of knives for a long time.
All night.
Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, that's a lot of information in a short period of time. Okay, the next question is, are there any books you recommend specific to blade defense concepts?
Yeah, I don't have them down here with me right now, but anything from obviously Michael Janch, I love his stuff. I really like Kelly McCann, James Keaton. Those are some of the ones that I really look back that have kind of set some good standards, I think, and they've analyzed it from a situation of self-defense.
Adam keeps putting questions in here. Yeah, I think a class with Adam and Adam would be really, really good. Clint says it's Adam squared. Adam squared. I'm all for that. Okay, do you make the Kydex sheaths, or would you consider allowing Haven Defense Company making them for those who want the sheath and are fans of Haven Defense Company?
Yeah, so the knives that I have made through Tops, they actually make the sheaths, but I have had several people that maybe like the fit different of something else. So there's no problem if somebody wants to order a Haven Defense sheath, that'd be awesome.
Cool. I don't know the name. Jean. We'll call her Jean. Would you suggest a neck K for a woman?
Yeah, I do like neck knives. Let me show you an example of that. Again, depending on size, this is actually one that a friend of mine made. This is probably a little bigger than I'd recommend for a lot of people to carry. But if you're going to carry a neck knife, one thing to think about too is you don't want to have like paracord or something that's not going to break around your neck. If I have a neck knife hanging around there and somebody gets a hold of the paracord, now they got something to strangle me with. So you want something like leather lace or like these beaded chains work really well. But basically, the nice thing about that is you just put it kind of on and just reach up underneath your shirt and you just pull and the knife is there. So yeah, I really like neck knives. When you think about how you're going to wear it as well, is get something, if you have a sheath made for it, that is sturdy. The last thing you want to do is there's knives that come with sheaths that aren't super tight. And what happens is you walk around and the next thing you know, the knife's falling out and it's falling down into your waistband, which again is not an ideal situation. Also, if you look at building a sheath or having one built, look at having the holes at the top so that as that's laying on your neck, it lays flat on your body so you're not getting any of that twist or anything like that. But yeah, I like neck knives a lot. Just realize that the deployment, again, you have to reach underneath your shirt to access it.
Okay, so it says, though we agree that a fixed blade is better, what folders do you recommend?
Okay, so again, I try to kind of not say, hey, this is the exact one I like, but I will tell you the ones I do currently like. I like the Spyderco Yojimbo 2. I really like the Hogue Deca Warncliffe. Those are probably my two favorite folders right now.
I feel like you're speaking a different language, Adam. This is not my world at all.
I wish I had the one down there. Yeah.
You don't have one on hand? Come on.
I've got like everything else here. If you look down here, I got like all these knives.
It looks like you've got everything.
But I have not. Yeah, I've got a collection. These are just my demo knives, and I didn't bring those. So,
hey, Adam, quick question for neck knives, right? My partner at work, God bless, rest his soul, but my partner at work carried a neck knife forever. I now own that, unfortunately, and I've carried it for a long time. I like yours better, so I think I'm going to be getting one of those. Anyways, on the neck knives for ladies, and tell me if I'm wrong in doing this, but I've been recommending if you're going to wear a neck knife for a lady, because Jensen asked, I recommend putting it on and either threading it down through the center of the bra or putting the bra on afterwards so it's holding it down so it doesn't flop. If not, it moves a lot, right? Because we're guys, right? Because I don't have a bra to hold it on. It seems like it moved a lot when I had it with a loose shirt. So is that something you recommend too? Yeah, that's solid advice. So if you do have a bra, put it underneath it. Another thing you can do to make it kind of a little bit more sticky is, you know, the shower mat that's kind of that rubberized shower mat. You can take some of that and stick it on the backside so it gives it something to kind of grip so it's not sliding as much. Okay. So that is an option too. But again, you don't want to make it too bulky. So you find like this thin stuff, but a little rubber on there. But yeah, you're spot on. If you tuck it underneath the bra, then it will keep it from rocking. Yeah. And the beauty is, right, a lot of ladies won't wear a belt, right? Yoga pants, whatever else. So it's a perfect place to hang the knife. But could you talk to about the length of the chain that they put on, right? And by the way, for those who didn't see it, it's almost like the toilet bowl chains that go inside a toilet bowl that when you pull it, it just pops out very easily. So you want that type of thing on there. But Adam, could you talk about the length? Because I found if it gets too low, let's say a lady has a shorter torso or they have a really long torso. So that's important, I found, so that if they reach under the shirt to grab it, it's still got to be there. They don't either go too high or it's down too low. Could you talk about that length of the neck chain? Yeah, I personally like to keep it about the sternum level. So the idea is where that hand kind of comes just a little below the sternum. My hand is right at the base of it. I don't want it down low where it's on my stomach, but if you basically picture kind of where your ribs kind of join, have about half of the knife-ish kind of there. So this would be on me right there, just kind of that length there is where I like it. And then again, if you picture having something that I retain that, there's not a lot to move that around. And for ladies, the beauty of what he's just showing you is you can access that with either hand, right? If a guy is attacking you and he doesn't want your stuff, right, meaning your purse, your keys, or something, he usually wants your body or your life, unfortunately. So at this point, your hands are probably going to be tied up, but this allows the hands to stay center line to the body and either hand to be able to get to it if you need to. So I'd strongly recommend those neck knives. I think they're great, especially if you're not carrying something with a belt or they can go in a sheath, but you can access it with either way very quickly and very easily right at your center line.
Yep, that's awesome. One thing I'll add off that, you mentioned yoga pants. That's one thing I've seen a lot with ladies coming through the class. Maybe guys too. I haven't seen it yet, but a lot of the ladies that will come through class wonder how they can carry without carrying a neck knife. And I don't have it with me, but have you seen the Ulti clips? It's like a little clip that looks like the suspender holder. So you can actually get a little one of those and then kind of file it down, sand it so it doesn't have sharp edges on it, but then tie a paracord piece to it. So basically picture having that little clamp attached to this end, and then I can still tuck it in my yoga pants at the top, but it's clamped on to there. Oh. And if you've ever played with the Ulti clips, if you get the right size, your pants will tear before that will come off. So that's another method too. If you maybe don't like the neck knife, but want to keep it center line or on your waist, you can also do something like that.
Yeah, I've seen another way to where, like, let's say you're wearing jeans, you can either tie it to a belt loop right to the front to where you can access it very easily, or you can, like, if you have buttons where it's a button that slides through the jeans, you can wrap it around the button and slide the button in through the eye loop for the jeans. So now that when you pull it, if it's in the appendix position, it comes out that way too.
Yeah, and I like the button one a lot better. I've had the belt loop, not the actual belt, but the belt loop. I used to run it that way because it was convenient. And I deployed my knife just training, and I ripped the belt loop off. So then my knife comes out and it's still inside the sheath. It's like, oh, that wouldn't have been what I wanted. So, yep. Awesome.
Wow, that's so much information. Oh my gosh. Like, I feel like I was drinking from a fire hose on that one, just because that's new to me. A lot of that is new to me. So thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. Like, I feel like that was just dipping our toe in the water, and there's so much more to learn. So I don't know if you're interested in coming back. You could be a regular. I think you could be a quarterly guest, because this information is not something that I'm familiar with necessarily. And I think a lot of people, a lot of so-called gun people don't dive deep into the knife world. Would you say?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I mentioned this a little bit, but when I tell those that I shoot guns with, they find out that I do the knife thing. They're like, well, I don't need a knife. I got a gun. I'll shoot you. There's a lot of times, like I said, where there's places where I work or where I travel where I can't carry a gun. Like I think guns are amazing, but there's places where I can't. And the cool thing with learning how to use a knife, you also kind of learn throughout the process of how to use improvised tools. So I literally always have something wherever I'm at. There's always something that I can use in a self-defense mode because of the way that you train with a knife and you understand proximity and all the things that go with it. So
concepts again are important. Because sometimes the tool doesn't matter as much. It's knowing the big picture of how to use weapons properly in general, handheld weapons. So if people want to learn more about you, Adam, they go to spartanmode.com, look you up on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We've got all that stuff running across the bottom of the screen right now. Are you going to be putting on any classes anytime soon, or do you have? Yeah,
so I've been doing a lot more private stuff lately. I've been doing more private groups or hiring me to go do those. So I am going to start throwing some more public stuff on there, but.
Okay. Good. We'll keep a lookout on all of his social media. He's good about posting on social media, so I would recommend that you go follow him there, and we'll see if we can get him back on again maybe in a few more months. Adam, you've been a complete pleasure to have on. So much information as usual, and you present it so well. So I really appreciate that and answering all of our questions.
Yeah, no problem. It's awesome being on. Thanks for having me.
You bet.